Oi, oi. Hello and welcome to another episode of Casting Views, the podcast that takes a topic each week and, as the name suggests, casts views. This week, well, it's the final Sunday of the month, so you know what that means. I'm having a dinner party, but I don't get to do any of the work. I get a lovely guest on to host a party for me. And this week, I'm really excited to say I've got another new voice to the show. So I've got Michael from the I Don't Have a Nose YouTube channel. So hiya, Michael.
Hello. Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, more than welcome, more than welcome. So we finally got here. So I know I've had to reschedule a couple of times. So appreciate you accommodating that. And I also want to shout out Luke from the Nerdstalgic, because it was Luke who sort of said, oh, do you know, it'd be really good for you to get on your show. He said it'll be Michael. And I'm not just saying it, but then I started watching your channel and your videos are funny. And they are.
Thank you. Yeah, Luke is. He's followed me for a while now. Because, I mean, it would have been back in. I know he's been following my channel for the last couple of years because I know he was coming to the premieres back in. I think it was during lockdown, actually, during 2020 or 21. But yeah, he's been very, very supportive.
He's a good guy. Don't tell him I said that, but he's a really good guy. So the first thing I wanted to ask you, so before we get into the dinner party, I want to talk a little bit about you. So the first question I've got is, why the name?
People always ask this. I mean, obviously, because I know it's a really weird name. But whenever they ask it, I kind of roll my eyes a little bit, because it's. People always expect it to be like a really interesting story, and it's really not. It's actually a really boring story. See, this channel actually started out as a blog, and it wasn't about video games. It was actually about animation. And I started the blog about 10 years ago now, actually. Yeah, because I was at uni, and I was struggling to come up with a name for it, and I didn't really have anything creative. I was, completely devoid of inspiration. I couldn't think of anything. And I just had this really crudely drawn mascot that was supposed to be a caricature of me. And for some reason, I called him Felix. And I don't know why I called him Felix. People ask me that as well. Why is he called Felix? I can't tell you because I don't remember. Or maybe I just like the name. I just can't remember. But based on that, well, it was just the fact that he looked like me, or was supposed to look like me, only he didn't have a nose. And then that was literally just where the name came from. I just called it I Don't Have a Nose because I couldn't think of anything else. And then one day I did a post about animation games, like licensed games based on animation, like slightly tangential to what I normally do. And it wasn't the biggest response I've had, but I noticed people liked it, they enjoyed it. And I think it was later that year or the following year, as in 2016, I decided to kind of branch out and use the channel, which I'd already used for like promotional stuff for the blog before, to do basically a pilot review of a PS1 game, and that was Casper. And it basically just built from there. There was like a switch over from animation to games, or, mostly games based on movies. And gradually the blog kind of phased out. I think the last time I used it was back in 2020, because I used to promote the videos on there, but gradually, obviously, the views of the blog went down because I wasn't really using it nearly as much. So it's basically just been a gradual progression from the blog to the YouTube channel, which is interesting because I decided to keep the name because I felt once you've got it, you're kind of stuck with it. Not that I hate the name.
It stands out.
Exactly. Yeah. Initially, before my videos gained any kind of traction, it was kind of annoying because I realized I may have made a mistake in calling it I Don't Have a Nose, because my videos would always appear alongside, news stories, tragic stories of people born without noses and stuff like that. But fortunately, that's kind of like faded into the background a bit. So, I don't regret the name. But at the time, I remember when I first came up with the channel, I was a bit like, maybe I should have given more thought to the name at the time. But no.
But it's the hardest thing, isn't it? So when I set this podcast up sort of 2.5 years ago now, it took me an age to come up with the name. Now, the name I've
Mm.
got isn't particularly innovative either, but it was just out of pure frustration where the angle was coming. So I couldn't think of a good name. And it was like, it's a podcast. I'm going to have views, casting views. That's it. We'll get on with it. And that's it. Sometimes the idea can just be born out of anything. And I think the answer now from now on, if anyone asks you that, is you should say, why not?
Oh yeah, but that's the thing though. At least yours has like a logic to it. You know,
Well, so
I
did
get the
yours. You had a
questions.
little character there. You drew a character and you named it. You took the
Yeah,
inspiration from that.
yeah. He used to appear in that little guy used to appear in some really crudely hand drawn stuff that I did originally on the
Right.
channel. A lot
Yeah.
of that's either deleted or set to private, so people can't view it now. But I did like a 3-minute Christmas film with him, and it was really well at the time. I was proud of it, but when I look back at it now, it was pretty terrible. Um, and I called it Rise of the Felix, as in like I put on Phoenix.
Yeah.
But looking back, I really wish I'd have called it because it was Christmas. I should have called it Felix Navidad. But nobody can watch it anyway. So I don't. It's just one of life's regrets. But yeah. I'd say I don't think that will ever be made public again. To be honest with you, I think that's well and truly in the past. But he's stayed with me.
And why not? And why not? And like I said, the name definitely stands out. I think it's a great name. It's just, yeah, I was curious. So the channel as it is then, how long did you say that's been going for?
Well, technically, I had the channel around the time of the blog, so that would have been either 2014 or 2015. I started using it, but as I say, those videos haven't, been accessible for a while. The actual main reviews didn't start until, like I say, I had the Casper pilot in November 2016, I think it was, and it wasn't until January the following year that I actually started properly doing these reviews. So technically, I say from 2017 onwards. And the early days were, I keep them on there because obviously they show progression, but the early ones are very, I will admit, they're very sketchy. Like the first one I did was A Bug's Life game review.
Okay, yeah.
And I honestly, I've kept it there because I know there are people who like it. And it, like I say, it does show progression, but it's a terrible video. I wound up basically almost doing like a re-review this year because I love that game. I grew up with it, and I wanted to do it justice. And that original review is awful, and I considered removing it from the channel, but yeah, no, it stayed there. People are always going to go look at it now. I made a joke about that in the A Bug's Life re-review. And I actually mentioned I've reviewed it before, but it was terrible. And I know you're going to go look at it now. I'm not ashamed of it because like I say, you
No,
you
but
make
that's it.
progress,
It's
you
it's part
improve.
of it's part of your channel, isn't it? And it's funny you said that because actually just this year I've gone back and I have archived off like the first 10 episodes of mine because they were just look. I'm not going to say they were bad, but at the time I thought, yeah, I sound good. We sound good. And when I went back, I thought, no, the audio was bad. It was still because it was new to us, and I'm actually kind of remastering them now. So I'm kind of re-recording them as you said. So, but
Yeah.
for me, I did take it off because I thought, yeah, if somebody stumbles upon that, that's not who I am now. So
Mm,
yeah,
mm.
the question I had though is, I think you said you are YouTube only, right? So I guess there's two questions around that. First, why? And I'm not saying oh, you should be sort of audio only as well, but is it always were you only ever going to be YouTube? And secondly, that to me, I'm quite in awe of people that do the video side of things because, firstly, yeah, it was bad enough. I remember listening to myself for the first few episodes of the podcast that went out, but I just can't imagine video edited as well. That's almost like the last hurdle I would have to clear. So, yeah, was it always going to be video for you?
It's interesting, I guess, because when I was little, I always used a handycam. I had like a camcorder, and I recorded a mix of things that were actually for my age decent, and a lot of terrible crap. Basically, it was awful.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've kept a lot of the all of them actually, all the camera tapes, and I did do like some very crude hand drawn animations. That's actually stayed the same. It's pretty consistent all this time. But yeah, I've always had an interest in making videos in some form. And initially, I know what you mean about, anxiety about being on film and editing yourself. But the thing is, when I've come to a point, and I came to this point a while ago, many years ago actually now, where I don't actually, I kind of dissociate with, the fact that it's me in the film, because it's not really me I'm editing. It's not myself that I'm editing. It's more just a performance, because most stuff I actually do is scripted. I
Hmm.
script everything and then I record it and edit it, and it does take some time. I think, speaking of audio, when I had a bit of a crisis when I was in my teens, because when my voice broke, I hated my voice, because
Right,
my
right.
voice seemed to gradually change. It wasn't like, they show it in the movies and it suddenly just goes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
mine wasn't like that. Mine was like a gradual, and it was always like up and down. It's really all over the place tonally. And for a long time, I didn't record anything. I don't know where it even came from, to be honest, why I decided to just suddenly start recording again. It's just suddenly I thought I can do this and I want to do it. And like I say, like you said, the original videos that I did in like early 2017, my voice can sound so mellow and boring. And at the time, I didn't think it sounded mellow and boring, but I think I've definitely improved my delivery. Personally, that's I'd like to think so, But
Well, I was going
yeah,
to say, I've watched the last few videos, and again, not just saying it, I think they're brilliant. I think it's so charismatic. I mean, humor is obviously a key part. And is that you, or did you? And again, did you make a conscious effort to put the humor into the videos?
I would say it's a huge part of me, actually, a huge part of me. I've never been the type to be. I've never been like a class clown or anything.
Mm,
I've never been like that. I know how I come across in the videos. I wondered actually if I would be different in person if someone were to actually meet me. Because I don't really know, based on how I come across in the videos, I don't know if they think I'm like really loud, jokey, outgoing. Because I can actually be, depends on the circumstances, obviously, but I can be quite quiet in like a social setting. I can be very subdued. But yeah, the humor's always been a big thing for me. And I know, like, I litter a lot of these videos with the cringiest dad jokes. I'm well aware of it, and I love it. I like dad jokes.
I think they're great. I think
Um,
they're great. Yeah.
but yeah, no, the humor's a big thing for me, really. But it's not just that. I think all the same, the thing I prioritize the most when editing a video is maintaining the pacing of it, and that's more difficult than you'd think, because sometimes I'll leave a joke in there that I'm not certain will get a massive laugh, but it helps to punctuate the video as well and provide like a bit of a breather throughout. And it's very difficult, particularly I'm working on a collaboration video at the moment, and those are especially difficult when you want to cut material, you want to keep as much of the other person in there as possible, but also you've got to be mindful of the fact that you've got like pretty much almost twice as much material as you would normally.
Yeah.
Sometimes, not in every case, obviously, but there's more material than usual, and it's a really difficult thing to like cut parts out and keep in all the vital parts, like parts of the game that people would want me to keep in, or yeah. So it's difficult, really, but humor is a big part of it, and I will sacrifice certain parts of the video if I think there's a joke in there that kind of supersedes it and it's more entertaining. So yeah, I think generally I'd say first and foremost I like to be informative, but I like to try and at least give it a bit of levity, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And those 2 points. So the couple of videos I've seen that highlight both of what you've just said is, so the first one I watched of you was the Tomb Raider, the
Oh
original
yeah.
Tomb Raider, and
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
that was very funny. But I watched today a really interesting video actually. It was about video clips, that older games used to have video clips and how they were dubbed differently. And that was actually fascinating because, you know, I would have played a lot of these games, but not having necessarily seen the film, I would never have picked up on that. So it was really interesting to have that. But you also, like you said, punctuating it with the joke here and there. And I'm going to say, I think there was one about, which one was it? It was about rhinos. I can't remember the film now. This is the thing. You see, I was terrible for not seeing Disney films growing up. But yeah, you said they wanted the original rhinos, but they charged too much. And then you said,
"Oh God,
I am not sorry." And that was it. I was creasing up. You said, "I'm not sorry." But yeah, so how do you like get the ideas for things like that? Because like I said, it was fascinating. I mean, was it in a Toy Story game where a lamppost fell, but it made a different noise, and you found out that it was from a telegraph pole falling originally.
I found that video on the movie clips I wanted to do a while ago. I've basically been compiling these like over time, and thinking, do I have enough for a full video on these? Because, you know, some of these I'd already reviewed the games, so I couldn't really put them in their reviews. And I decided I'd actually got enough material to do like a full video on it. And well, I thought it was interesting, and I thought, well, hopefully someone else finds it interesting too, you know, because I mean, I found it interesting myself, because I'm actually, I'd say if there's one thing that I do like about myself, is that I can be quite percipient and notice little details that are different. And that was one in particular that I noticed right away. As soon as I saw the deleted scene in Toy Story 2, I just happened upon it by chance, and it was, you know, the telegraph pole falling. And I noted the sound effect right away. I was like, that's exactly the same as the sound effect in a video game. And I realized what had happened, like put two and two together and realized that was obviously going to be the original thing. And they obviously get the sound effect the same. But yeah, I understand. My worry with that video was when I did it, I thought a lot of these things I'm mentioning, I don't know if people will find it as interesting as I do. I'll be honest, I was winging it a bit with that video, because it's not typically what I'd normally do. It wasn't like a standard review, but the response was you know, it was still good. I really liked it.
Thank you. And especially as you made the point that, and again, it was one that was lost on me over time, that yeah, we did used to have like those digitized clips, and I think I did prefer that, because it made you feel more as part of the film, if you know what I mean. So yeah, there's a bit of a jolt when you then cut back to the game, but yeah, we don't really do that anymore, do we?
No, not since Disney Interactive, they went bump in 2016. So since then, we've had very few movie games, and what movie games we do have are either rushed or on quite a tight budget. And I thought it was quite promising, because when I did that Scrat Ice Age PS4 game review last year, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't a great game, but I was actually happy to see it all the same, because we just don't get that kind of game anymore.
Yeah.
You know, nothing based on a licensed franchise. You know, we don't get that anymore. And it's kind of a shame on the one hand, but obviously there were plenty of other games that were rushed to tie in with, you know, movie releases that are absolutely dreadful. Yeah. Like I think one of the worst would have to be Shrek Treasure Hunt, because that was just absolutely horrendous, but funny horrendous. I can derive a lot of joy from bad things, like bad movies. Yes, and it's the same with bad games as well. It depends how bad. If it's so bad it's boring, then there's a big difference there. But if it's actually just like, if it's just obnoxiously garish and nothing like the source material, then I find it hilarious. I like stuff like that.
I like a janky game more than the next person, and I keep saying it. So whenever there's a bad game reviewed and you know people are kind of slating it, I'm like looking down, kicking my feet, saying, I agree. As soon as it's hit that certain price point, it's in my collection.
That's like me with bad movies as well. I swear, at this point in my life, I've actually seen more bad movies than good ones. I have a bunch of friends, and whenever there's a bad movie that they find, they always say, "Oh, we need to watch this together." People never want to watch a good film with me. They always say, "You're going to love this." I'm like, "Oh God, here we go."
Well, quality is subjective, right? It's subjective. And I watched the Scrap one as well today, so that was quite funny. So why that subject as well? Again, I know that's a sort of a cliche question, but is it just the mix of you've always been into gaming as well, but you're going down a specific route for your channel, aren't you?
That's the thing. Well, it's weird because I noticed that there was actually there wasn't really much about licensed video games besides, I mean, not like a channel that deals exclusively with licensed video games. And I mean, obviously, at some point, like I say, I have branched out a little bit already because, as you say, I've done the Tomb Raider video. I've done at least one other game that's not based on a franchise. But yeah, I don't know really. It just seemed to be something people were interested in. I found that from my blog post that I did all those years ago, and yeah, it seems that people enjoy that kind of thing. I get requests all the time. I've recently been getting a lot of requests from one guy in particular for the Ant Bully, which I've never seen the movie, and every single video I'm uploading, he'll comment on it and request the Ant Bully, and it's just, at some point he's actually convinced me. At some point, I'll likely cover it, but yeah, people enjoy these things, but obviously, I'd say that of the Disney games, a lot of the best ones I've probably covered. So, I am intending to branch out a little more and do more games that I am interested in, more film reviews as well, that kind of thing. It's not strictly all about games. But yeah, no, it's a kind of a bit of a niche, and I do think that branching out and doing some games outside of licensed games might actually do my channel some favors too, because I've had some other requests as well that I've considered doing, but obviously a lot of other games that aren't the licensed games that I cover are a lot lengthier. There's a lot more to them,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
obviously I've got to record the entire game, and there's going to be a hell of a lot of editing with the with the script writing and everything, but we're going to do it. I'm gonna do some more, be a bit more adventurous. Put it
Watch
that
his
way.
space. Watch his space.
Yeah.
I've got a couple more questions just around the pod. This one, I've been trying to word it to not sound condescending, but that sounds really bad. But as a younger person, and I've been talking to Luke as well. I've had him on here, sorry, and I've asked him a similar sort of question. But how do you look back at? Because there seems to be a real vibe for people enjoying like nostalgic games and the quote retro games. How do you what is the appeal for those? Is it just to go back to see like a generation of games that you didn't get to play as you were growing up? I guess I'm just trying to ask, yeah, is there an appeal? Is there kind of, or what is the appeal to play these older games?
It's a combination, really. I would say part of it is nostalgia because I did grow up with a lot of them, but obviously with all the requests, we're branching out. We branched out quite a while ago into other territory that I've never discovered these games before. I actually find it really interesting seeing the development of some of these games, and a lot of the time with movie games, I actually find it really interesting what they actually do with the movie. I like them when they expand on the movie rather than doing something totally different. Because, like you say, what you want to play, you want it to be like an interactive version of the movie. So
Yeah.
that's part of the appeal. In terms of old games, I'm not actually strictly all about old games. I just personally have a preference, I think, for older style games.
Hmm.
I don't play a lot of modern games at all. The occasional one I do, but even then, the ones I'm really invested in have a very, what people would probably deem to be an old fashioned format. Like one of the recent games I got into was a game called Baldo. I reckon actually it'll probably become something of a cult game over time because it's very puzzle oriented and it's a very old fashioned style puzzle kind. I guess it's like vaguely RPG ish, but I loved it. I understand why it's not to everyone's taste, but I love a challenge.
Mm.
And I have to say, though, visually, it looks like it's a PS2 game, but that doesn't bother me. It's PS4. It doesn't bother me at all. I actually prefer a focus on the actual gameplay over stuff like graphics. Graphics don't bother me. I've had
Yeah.
conversations with people before about, they'll say stuff like, "Oh, I can't play anything older than, this particular date because the graphics were so bad." And to me, it doesn't really bother me as long as the gameplay is of a playable standard. It doesn't bother me. Like for example, the original Tomb Raider has its quirks. It's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
blocky, but you get used to it. Like obviously, you've got to put yourself in the shoes of someone playing it in the 90s, and you got to think of how these things were made at the time. I'm actually impressed by a lot of games and how I'd say a lot of them are actually quite ahead of their time. Like one of the best movie games I ever played, and I still stand by this. In terms of gameplay, it can be a little awkward, but I absolutely loved the Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit game. Even the name, I remember it was actually bought for me one Christmas, and I remember thinking, this sounds dreadful because I can't imagine Wallace and Gromit on the PlayStation being any good. I like Wallace and Gromit, but I just thought, a video game? I don't know. And I shelved it for some time. And eventually I got round to properly playing it. And I was blown away because it is basically like the closest thing to an open world Wallace and Gromit PlayStation game that they ever did. And I thought it was incredible. You could talk to all the townspeople. You could, clear their pests and everything. And then there's all the were-rabbit business on the nights, obviously. I thought it was incredible. What they did with it was really inspired. There are other ones, obviously, where there were just, other games that they just clearly didn't give a toss about. Basically,
Yeah. Yeah.
they just do any old thing. But occasionally I found them really impressive. And considering as well they were movie games, some of them were actually really ambitious. I'd say I wouldn't really consider myself. Well, I always say this. I don't consider myself to be a gamer, but I guess I am in a sense because I do play games. But I've got very like niche interests, like
Mm.
very like particular games that I'm interested in, and I'll replay the same ones over and over again. So I am more interested in whenever I review stuff, I don't just take the gameplay into consideration, but stuff like location replicas, like how
Oh,
something's
okay.
presented in a video
Yeah.
game,
Yeah.
or voice acting, um, just basic level design, stuff like that. And yeah, a lot of the time, I find with modern games, I've been completely honest here. I'll look at the game and it won't appeal to me at all.
Mm.
Like I can watch like so many clips of different games, and not one of them will mean a thing to me. I'm very much, I'd say much more into like old, classic PlayStation games. Really, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, occasionally 3.
Well,
Yeah,
they had to have the gameplay mechanics in that because, as you said, the limitations on memory and graphics and size, that was real, right? So
yeah.
I've got one more question for you.
Okay.
Is there a game that's got away from you at the moment? Is there like that game that you are desperate to try but you've not been able to get your hands on?
That that's a tough one, actually. That's a very tough one. There are, see, I have to admit, I've actually got some games in my house right now that I have been meaning to play and I haven't got round to it. So, in the sense, I mean, it hasn't exactly eluded me if I've actually got it, but I've never played Eco or Eco. I think it's pronounced Eco,
Oh, right.
ICO,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
was, yeah, the makers of, well, later they did Shadow of the Colossus and The
yeah.
Last Guardian. I love those two games, and I have never played Eco. Never played
Okay,
Eco. And I've
okay.
been meaning to, but it's one of those things where, well, for one thing, it's kind of it's time. It's one of those that's just it's been shelved for some time, and life happens, so I never actually get around to playing it. Likewise, I've actually got a whole bunch of the Kingdom Hearts games. I really love Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2, and I'm ashamed to say, despite being a rather big Disney game fan, I've never played Kingdom Hearts 3, purely because I promised myself that I would actually play the other games, because there are loads of games in between 1, 2, and 3. It's insane. And I'd seen some clips of some of the other games and thought, actually, these look more interesting than I thought they would be. And I got so far into one of the games, and I did it. I was enjoying it. But like I said, I just haven't had the time. Like with over the last few years, what with work and maintaining the channel as well,
Mm.
I actually rarely get time to play games I actually enjoy. And a lot of the time, people will request stuff that's sometimes it's dreadful, and I just sit
Yeah.
there thinking, what am I doing with my life? It just looks like I got really bad taste, you know. Like, oh, the M&M's game, that was something
Oh
else.
wow,
Yeah,
wow. Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah, yeah.
no, yeah. I so there's actually plenty. There are plenty of games I've never played, and there's probably lots out there that I would thoroughly enjoy. I know that I really want to play Hollow Knight at some point. I've never
Okay,
played
yeah.
Hollow Knight, and I've actually no. I tell you what, I've actually got this, but I haven't played much of it, and I did enjoy the beginning of it, and that was Little Nightmares. I
Oh
like
yes, yeah,
that
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of. I
The
like
style and
yeah, side-scrolling indie games. I loved Limbo as well. That was a
yes,
very
yeah.
dark and creepy game. I have to be in the right mood for these games though, because they can be quite depressing.
Yeah, yeah,
But
well, yes, yeah. But I'm
yeah,
definitely getting more enjoyment out of indie games at the moment as well.
mm, mm,
Definitely, you know, sometimes a short, sharp burst of gaming, if it's 3 or 4 hours, it's not a problem as long as it delivers a
yeah.
good game, a good experience. Yeah,
Exactly, and if it's bite size as well, that's helpful if you're actually working a full-time job at the same
yeah,
time. So
yeah, yeah,
but yeah, no, I do need to get back into the Kingdom Hearts series definitely. I know people want me to review it as well, but it's gonna take a year
yeah,
and a day because those games are so long
yeah,
and
yeah.
there's so much to
Good luck
talk
with
about.
that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, yeah,
Okay. Okay. Well, look, well, thank you for allowing me to dive into a little bit more about yourself and the channel. We will get on to the main part of the episode, but we are just going to hear an ad from some friends of mine at the PodPack Collective. We're going to hear it from Seismic Cinema.
We're Seismic Cinema. I'm Colin. I've probably not seen it. Paul's watched it in the wrong order.
And I'm James, and I've probably written an essay on it. And that's Seismic Cinema. We believe in the power of escapism.
Oh, thank God for that. That'll do.
This is Luke from the Nerdstalgia podcast, and you're listening to Casting Views, a member of the PodPack Collective.
Right. So, Michael, we are back. So, this is the main part of this episode. The whole reason for getting you on. So, you're hosting a dinner party. I'm guest number one. I've already come through the door. I've made myself comfortable. Thank you very much. So you are going to give me 3 courses. We'll do it one by one. So you'll give me a course, explain why you've chosen that, and then you're going to, at the same time for that course, you're going to invite a celeb or a person of note and why you've invited that person. So let's start logically at the starter.
okay. I for a starter, it was a toss-up for this between. In the end, I whittled it down to. I'm a big foodie, by the way. I love food, and it was between calamari and prawn cocktail, both seafood.
Yeah.
And I went for prawn cocktail because that's always been a firm favorite since I was a kid, basically.
Classic. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I used to love Marie Rose sauce until obviously many years ago.
Yeah.
I thought it was like some sort of fancy sauce, and then I realized it was like ketchup and mayonnaise.
Yeah.
But I know I love prawn cocktail. So yeah, I'm afraid I've got no vegan options for my for my meal today. So yeah, I'm hoping none of the people I invite to it are vegan or vegetarian because I think
Yeah.
yeah, it's full of meat. I'm afraid.
But that is a classic starter, and I remember sort of growing up, I just didn't like the look of prawns, and I would always refuse them until I can't remember how old I was, maybe 9 or 10. I finally had one, and that was it. I wanted them all the time then, you know. And like you said, in that fancy sauce, we'll keep calling it fancy. That's fine.
Yeah.
Don't break that illusion for me. But yeah, no, can't doubt that, and it's a great starter, isn't it? It's a nice, easy, light one to start.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay, so who's coming through the door to enjoy that?
Well, this was the celebrity that I was actually certain would be there, and to my friends it would come as absolutely no surprise that I'm mentioning this person because I am a massive fan of Alanis Morissette,
Oh
actually.
wow, okay, yeah,
So I don't know why. It's really weird. Like, well, back in, I'd say, the mid to late noughties, I kind of discovered, her music, and it was actually I. It's very strange. When you just listen to music that's like definitively you, it just fits
Mm.
you, the sound and lyrics, and I basically listened to some of the popular stuff and then got invested in the rest of her discography. I think as well, for a dinner party, she would be able to provide very profound conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, it wouldn't be fitting for everybody. I think it might just, I mean, it can be quite. It depends really how deep it gets, but I reckon it would be good conversation. So that was my thinking for the first guest. Yeah.
Really interesting, actually. And someone who, yeah, I don't know why. I mean, she burst onto the scene here in this country anyway with the first album, some great singles, and then at least here again in the UK, didn't really maintain that success, and I don't know why. I know a few years ago she made a bit more of a comeback, and I don't know if social media had a part to play in that. But she's got a great voice.
Yeah, she's still been going. She's still
Yeah,
going now. But yeah, it was she's with like an indie label now. So basically kind of shied away from the limelight, I think. But she's had some successes since that album, but it's always Jagged Little Pill they talk about. That's
yeah,
always the album. But every artist got that one album that makes them stand out. Plus, I think in the UK as well, we had other things like the Spice Girls, a lot of other stuff in the 90s that I think kind of took precedence.
90s
Um,
was wild in terms of the acts that were coming out. Yeah,
there was a lot of variety as well in the 90s.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
wasn't she was like 19 when she made that, wasn't she? 1920, I think.
When
So
she wrote it, yeah,
it's
yeah.
incredible, really, isn't it? We won't go into it too much because I already know I want to invite you back for a different episode called Mind Wipe. I don't know if you've listened to that, so
Okay.
some of that will come into that. But is music as well? Is it an important part of your life?
Definitely, absolutely, and it's always very weird because talking about music, I've always found it very fascinating how subjective it can be.
Mm,
Like I have friends who, like for example, I have a particular friend. I'll go round his now and again, and we'll put on a shared playlist,
mm.
and his music taste is totally different to mine. But then every now and again, there'll be like some vague crossover where he'll put something on and I'll suddenly start and go, oh wow, no, I really like this, and
Yeah,
vice
yeah.
versa. And it's surreal because generally speaking, I'd say our tastes are very, very different. And it's so
Mm.
surprising when there's that one song that
Yeah.
just kind of, that hits a spot for both of you. I'd say that my genre is like more, I'd say it's like a vaguely rock, but not too heavy. I would say
Yeah.
it's like pop rock, country rock, a little folky. I don't really know.
Okay.
It's very hard to define, but it can be anything. There's some electronica in there. It depends on just what works for you, and I think that's why it's so hard to define as well.
Yeah, I was also one that, apart from like really heavy metal or death metal or all those kind of metals, it was anything goes. But also that played havoc with your wallet and your bank balance. That's the
Yeah.
problem, the amount of things you end up buying. But yeah, I said to you, we'll save that for another conversation I know I'm going to have with you. Let's move on to the main course.
Right. Okay. So I don't know if this is going to sound dull or boring, but for me personally, I would have to go for a traditional turkey dinner, basically a Christmas dinner,
Yeah.
because I would say that's probably my favorite meal. Obviously, I couldn't have it every day; that would be a bit much. But I would say, yeah, turkey with perhaps like a Yorkshire pudding and roasted potatoes and sprouts. Actually, I like sprouts.
Okay.
I know
Yeah.
that's a controversial opinion, but I like
I'll
sprouts.
always have one on the plate because it's tradition. But
Yeah, that's exactly like my mom. Yeah, she's like, I have it because it's the done thing, but I don't
Yeah.
like it at all.
Yeah.
And sweet potato, carrots, the whole basically Christmas dinner with cranberry sauce, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, huge portion stuffing.
Oh, and stuffing, yeah, it's got to, right? Yeah, it's it sort of the English cuisine does get a lot of stick, but what you said there is just heaven on a plate. There is
Yeah, I
nothing
know,
wrong
right?
with a nice roast dinner, and especially turkey with the gravy and the sort of the Yorkshire pudding. Come on, what's not to like about any of that?
Exactly. No, I love it. It's my favorite meal. I know as well. I'm looking forward to the bank holiday coming up because my mom does like a turkey dinner.
I really okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So
Well,
that's
we'll have in my house sort of once a week roast chicken dinner, and
oh
do you know
yeah,
what? Especially
yeah.
like the turkey dinner, like the Christmas dinner, it's something I've appreciated more as I've got older. I don't think I appreciated it much as a kid, but I love it now. Pigs in blankets, roast potatoes. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, same. When I was little, I hated. It's very strange actually because when I was little, I was such a picky eater, and
Right?
then
Yeah.
I think just randomly one day, it just kind of hit me when I'd say I'd have been in early to mid teens, and I suddenly decided, why do I hate things? Why do I dislike this? And I started to question it and just try more and kind of force myself to try more things. And now these days, I basically eat anything.
Funny what you said, yeah, because you grow up with these preconceptions that you've had since you were a kid, that I don't like this, I don't like that, and even me, over the years, you try that and you think, you know what, I actually do quite like that, but don't make it look too obvious. Start trying it. Yeah, no, okay, I've come to like it, but yeah, maybe it's just that one bad experience you've had, or you've had
Mm.
it somewhere where they didn't do it well. But yeah, try more is a motto, then is a message. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I met plenty of people as well. Like a girl I used to work with, she always said that she knows she has the palate of a child. Every single food item I would mention, and she would just pull a face at it, and I'd just kind of roll my eyes and just go, oh, "You're really missing out." Like I understand it. When you're little, you don't try these things, you don't push yourself. But
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
so much good food out there that she's just not experiencing.
yeah.
So
That's the problem. Is I'll eat anything now. So
well, yes, it is a problem too. Yeah, yeah.
okay. So who's coming through the door now?
Well, I was umming and ahhing as to whether I wasn't sure if you'd consider it a celebrity, but it would be a celebrity, but not one known to mainstream media.
Mhm.
I actually had to acknowledge Kadikarus. He's basically he's a pretty famous YouTuber. He does like reviews of video games. Now, I have to admit, I haven't watched a full video of his for a long time. I actually don't have time to. He now does like really lengthy videos, still on the same kind of topic, on old video games mostly. But I would say he played a major part in my inspiration for doing the videos. And although I think our humor is different, I do see him as somebody that I would be able to get along with on a one-to-one basis. And I think he would be interesting company for conversation.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he's very different to Alanis. So I'm not sure they'll get along. But see, in the early days, he used to do. He was one of the few people that I did watch that did brief reviews of licensed games, and it's a shame. And I've noticed that in later on, he decided to kind of almost disregard the earlier videos because he decided that he didn't like them anymore. I suppose in the same way that I said earlier that I don't like my earlier stuff. I never rewatch the earlier stuff because it makes me cringe. But I also think it's bad to remove it. He didn't remove them from his channel. He just basically labeled them all as old, just to ensure that everyone knew it was an old video. And I think it's a shame really because although obviously from a technical perspective his videos have majorly improved, I also think, well, there's also like the passion there and the humor there that obviously a lot of people appreciated. He wouldn't be where he is now if it weren't for those videos.
That content, yeah, absolutely.
So, all the same though, I mean, I haven't properly watched his videos for some time, as I say, but now and again, I will, flick back to his channel, and he's still producing content, is still, doing very well, and I find it pretty admirable, really. I find it, I'd say he was one of the main inspirations in the early days, at least. for starting up the channel.
And sorry, and just the name again, sorry?
Cadicarus. It's
Icarus.
basically, his name is Jim Caddick. And basically, like I say, in the early days, he did a lot of licensed video games. Not all licensed, but a lot of, a lot shorter, compact reviews and humorous reviews as well. And I have been compared to Cadicarus a couple times in the past. These days, I don't really see it. I think gradually over time, I think you kind of find your groove and you actually, I understand similarities, though I do think sometimes a lot of the comparisons come from people who are, say, if they're overseas and they see me, they see Cadicarus, we're both British, and maybe there's some similarity in the conveyance of the review. But in terms of the actual humor, I do think we are not completely the same. And like I say, I think over time as well, I've come to develop my own way of doing my reviews. They're a lot more. I'd say they're a lot more inspired, actually. In terms of the pieces to camera that I record, I was also inspired by Nostalgia Critic, who I'm not inviting to the party. He's been left out of this one, I'm afraid. But yeah, it's like it's a composite basically. It's an amalgamation of several different people that I watch. But Cadicarus was indeed one of the main ones. So yeah, he's coming.
Excellent,
he has no choice.
Excellent.
He has to come for a second at gunpoint. Yeah.
Okay, and for dessert, and before we go into it, actually, are you a dessert person? And I ask that because people often fall between, no, I don't like dessert, I'd rather have 2 starters and a main, or no, I don't like the starters, I'd rather have 2 desserts than a starter. So, or do you just enjoy it all?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, really, because just a few years ago, I actually won a dessert eating competition.
Really?
In my hometown. Yeah, I was the only person to get through all 7 courses.
Wow.
And actually I would have been the only person ever, because after that they reduced the number of courses to 6. So I was the only one to actually complete all 7 courses. It was basically at this, I think it was at like a cake shop, and they'd open like I don't know what it was actually. It was some sort of cake shop that it no longer exists, unfortunately. But yeah, it was 7 courses, and they were all pretty substantial as well.
Yeah.
So yes, I like desserts.
Oh,
yeah.
I think
I don't normally get through. Don't normally get through seven courses of a dessert, But I usually try and vary it. If I have a starter, I usually don't have a dessert.
Yeah.
It can be a bit much.
No,
Not that I couldn't eat it, but
Well, that's what I was going to say. Put a slice of cake in front of me, I'm going to eat it. I'm not going to turn it away.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably in a restaurant, I probably wouldn't order it. But yeah, wow, that's impressive. See, I've done a couple of episodes on record breakers and food challenges. Felt like you should have come on for one of those.
I see. I have to say, I do eat a lot of sweet stuff. I do have a sweet tooth, but the next day, everybody was complaining. Everyone who was actually there with me complained about still feeling so full and sick. And actually, next day I was working at I was at the time working in retail. I was on checkouts, stood up on checkouts, and I felt so full. I hadn't actually eaten that day. I was so full of stuff. But yes, it was actually kind of ironic as well, because in that room, I think I was actually at the time the thinnest person in the room, which was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yes, major sweet tooth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So having said all that, so what are we having for dessert then?
I opted for banoffee pie, actually.
Nice.
I love banana. That came out really weird. Banana. See, I used to love, when I was little, I used to love like a hot chocolate fudge cake. But over time, as my palate has developed, shall we say, I love chocolate. I'm a major chocoholic. But chocolate cake these days, I actually find kind of boring. Not that I won't eat it. I'll still happily eat it because it still tastes good. But I'm a little more, I like something a little bit different.
Yeah.
And it was between banoffee pie and a cheesecake. Because I do love a good cheesecake. But banoffee pie is it's especially, I'd say it's especially sweet. I do have like a major sweet tooth. It is kind of cheesecakey. It's got that kind of that that biscuit base. So
Yeah.
banoffee pie. Banoffee
See,
pie.
it's
That's
really
the way
interesting what you're saying, because I've got nothing bad to say about chocolate cake, but that's something you can get from the supermarket. You can have any day of the week. So something, as you were saying, something different, something slightly, it doesn't have to be exotic and rare to find or from the rarest ingredients, but something slightly different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something a little more adventurous. Well,
Yeah.
slightly, kind of.
So who's coming through the door now?
Just to check, with these celebs, they can be deceased as well, can't
Yes,
they?
sorry, yeah. If I didn't say that,
Okay.
yes, I can. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so I actually went for because of my love of animation, for some entertainment. I decided on Mel Blanc, the
Okay.
voice actor.
Yeah. Wow.
I
Yeah.
figured he would give the evening some levity. Maybe Alanis's conversations have gotten a little bit heady, and and we wanted someone to like lift the mood a little bit.
Yeah.
I thought for some evening entertainment that we'd have Mel Blanc over, and he can do some of his voiceovers.
Okay. Again, really another really interesting choice. So, cartoons also play a big part in your history, or?
Definitely, I would say. I have not seen every single Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies cartoon, but I've seen a good many of them. I have over 500 of them on home video, so basically from VHS to DVD, and maybe a few others on some other format lying around. But yeah, I've always been like a massive Looney Tunes fan, which is why whenever there's video games, Looney Tunes video games, one thing they almost always get right is references to the old media. And of course, it's only references that, hardcore Looney Tunes fans and cartoon fans would get. And that was one of my favorite things to do, actually. One of my most popular videos from last year was about the references that would throughout Bugs Bunny Lost in Time, which was the first Looney Tunes PlayStation game. Well, excluding Space Jam, because that was terrible. But it wasn't really proper Looney Tunes. The very first Bugs Bunny game, Bugs Bunny Lost in Time, and yeah, the amount of references throughout that is insane. It's I'd say it's not quite on a par with say Simpsons Hit and Run. The amount of references they put in there to Simpsons episodes is crazy, but I've always been fascinated by that kind of thing. And yeah, Looney Tunes, I'd say a big part of my growing up. I've always appreciated them, and it's good to see, I think personally, that they're kind of coming back a little bit. There's a bit of a revival of Looney Tunes. I know that HBO Max says new Looney Tunes cartoons, and there's actually going to be a new 2D movie, I believe, animated movie,
Okay.
which surprises me. It's officially going to be the first fully animated Looney Tunes movie, excluding the compilation movies that they had in the 70s and 80s that were just basically like bridging sequences for old cartoons. They've actually gone ahead and made a fully animated film. And now I've said that, they'll probably announce that it's cancelled and it's never coming out. But I still think it's really interesting that I don't think, even today, they really get the acknowledgement that they deserve. I think these days as well, it's a bit difficult because obviously a lot of people are very careful about what children see, and violence, occasionally racism in some really old cartoons. But I do think they deserve more acknowledgement than they get, because you hear about Disney all the time, and Warner Brothers cartoons, like they've been around. Like Bugs Bunny has been around since, well, technically pre-1940, and Mel Blanc was Daffy Duck's voice for the longest time. I still think he holds a title of the longest amount of time that somebody has voiced an animated character, because it was between I want to say 1937, or right, I think it's 1938 and 1989. His death basically 1989. I think the last time he did a voice was probably 1988, but I might be wrong there. But either way, it's a very long time. It's like 50 years or so. So incredible, and yet you don't really hear a great deal about Looney Tunes. I don't think, at least not in this country.
Looney Tunes, again, what a pick, because I remember, so when I was at school, well, I went to school sort of through the mid to late 80s, early 90s, finished school at 3:30, run home, because around 3:45, my dad would go to work again about 4-ish, just after 4. There'd be on BBC, there'd be a couple of Looney Tunes cartoons before the kids programming really kicked off. And yes, you'd get a couple of episodes. It's either Tom and Jerry, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Foghorn Leghorn. And my dad even really enjoyed it at the time. And it was just one of those things that we would sit and watch together. They were just captivating as a child,
Yeah.
those cartoons. Yeah.
Yeah, they had character to them. That was one thing that I preferred about the Warner Brothers cartoons. They seemed a lot more they had more of an edge to them than a bunch of other cartoons, and like Disney. I mean, don't get me wrong, I appreciate the old Disney stuff. I do love a lot of old Disney media, but the Looney Tunes, it's like Warner Brothers knew that they couldn't compete with Disney, so they basically they basically parodied Disney a lot of the time. They just did subversive stuff that Disney would never do, kind of like how similarly in a way DreamWorks did with their movies in the late 90s, early noughties, compared to Disney. They did something a little darker and edgier to kind of because I know they can't compete, they may as well do the exact opposite, basically. So
yeah, I mean, even to the extent of like Roadrunner was a silent cartoon, pretty much, wasn't it? Apart from some noises.
Yeah.
So that was quite an interesting choice to have, like a 5-minute cartoon with with no scripting and some quite dark humor in the sense of what used to happen to poor old Wiley, right?
You feel sorry for him.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And how much of a tab did he have running with the Acme Corporation? That's what
why did he blindly trust them so much, but nothing ever worked?
Yeah, and you see, this is it. You start remembering it, and I just loved how physics just didn't work in Roadrunner. It was the opposite. So like when he was soaring off the edge of the mountain, and it would be the rest of the
and
night.
the mountain fell. Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay, you kind of said it earlier. So one of the things I like to ask is, do you think the guests would get along?
I think they're very, very diverse. I would like to think so, but it's very, thinking about it, it's going to be very difficult. I think individually I'd get on with each person to some degree, and then I think in a room together, is it going to be a bit too much? A bit too diverse. I think it will be fine. I would say maybe, maybe it might be quite loud, actually. I think the quietest there would be Alanis, most likely.
Yeah.
Despite what she's known for screeching, you ought to know. But I'd say it would be quite sociable. I think we have quite a social vibe. So yeah,
I think it's a really good mix. I think it's a really good mix, I guess, and a classic meal. Not gonna get not gonna say anything wrong past that either. So okay, right, this is where we go a little bit random. So thank you for giving me that.
Okay,
we've had our meal, we're all sitting down. Well, this was a really random one. What 3 video game characters would you have over for dinner, and why?
Okay, so first of all, it's difficult because I was trying to think initially, because I like a lot of older games, and a lot of older games, although I do appreciate a good story, it was very difficult to think of who I'd like as a character to have over, like who can I actually vibe with. But I thought, of all the old PlayStation 1 games, one of my absolute favorites was Oddworld Abe's Odyssey.
Okay,
and I would have Abe over, if no other reason besides the fact that he's rather malnourished. So I figured
Banoffee pie will work.
Yeah, he looks like he needs feeding. Literally just because I wanted to pay homage to that game in particular, because it was a rather big game for me. And yes, I mean, he seems amiable enough as well. He seems nice. But yes, he could do with feeding. And otherwise, I thought of one of my favorite games that's actually on PlayStation 3 is Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White
Okay.
Witch.
Yeah.
And it's an RPG that's in the beginning is quite simple, but there are some tougher parts in it, especially later on. But one standout character in that is Mr. Drippy, and he is the Tear Fairy. He's a little fairy that, for some reason, in the English version, he's Welsh. I'm not sure why, but it suits him. I don't know why. He's quite a funny character. I thought he can actually give us some like light entertainment
Yeah.
for the party. He'd actually be very easy to get along with. I think he's yeah. So he's a form of entertainment. Abe's just eating. And the other one I decided on was Guybrush Threepwood
Wow.
from the Monkey Island series.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that. Great
Really?
choice. Great choice.
I was thinking in terms of character. I thought I like his personality. He's kind of a bit awkward. And he'd be able to regale you with a whole load of interesting stories.
Yeah.
About his adventures and against LeChuck. I
That's
think
brilliant. That's
yeah,
brilliant.
I think that'd be very again very diverse, about as diverse as the other dinner party.
Yeah,
But yeah.
Oh wow, what a game! What a game! Right, but no, we'll talk about that another time. But wow, that is a choice. Yeah, because he just seems like just a nice chap you'd have over for a drink, right?
Yeah. It's very ordinary. So yeah.
Okay, what game would you make us all play?
I thought the best one I would have for a dinner party where not everyone is necessarily clued up on video games. The best thing I can think of would perhaps be I went for the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy.
Okay.
Simply because it's not easy. It's not easy, but in terms of the controls, it's easy enough to grasp. So I figured you have something for everyone there. Like, okay, there's no multiplayer, but you've got basically, if you're a novice with video games, it's really basic controls, and if you are, if you're more of a hardcore gamer, then you can do stuff like the tougher levels and the time trials, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think there's something in there for everyone. I think it's like the best all-encompassing kind of platform game. That was one of several I could think of, and I figured I'd go for that one.
No, that's a good one. I do like the passer controller games because it also gives you a chance to continue nibbling on the snacks that you've left out in between your games. But there is something about watching somebody else either fail hilariously or sort of do that bit that you've done and see how well they're doing. So there is something addictive about watching other people play, especially you're not controllerless for too long. So it's always your time to come around again.
As a pass and play, I mean, you can be competing, but also you're kind of working together to get to the end of the level. So it's like it's a bit of both, really. It's like the best of both worlds.
No,
so,
excellent.
Yeah.
And the final question for you is, what film would you make us all play and why? Now, I probably should have said to you, you didn't have to make it like a Disney one, so it's up to you. So yeah, if you had to put a film on for us to finish the night off, what would it be?
Again, this is quite difficult because, as with music, like my taste is really all over the place because it varies from stuff that's animated to really quite depressing dramas. I don't tend to watch a lot of action films. I do like the occasional thriller, but I can't think of anything in particular. I was debating, it was going to be an animation. I figured it would make sense, considering, the subject matter. I actually tried to think of a film that I've seen over the last few years that I really enjoyed, and it was a toss-up between I do enjoy Into the Spider-Verse, but I actually went for, and this actually surprised me that this actually trumped a whole bunch of other films, but I genuinely think it's a great film. I actually went for Puss in Boots 2.
Wow.
Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I know, right? I genuinely think it's a great film and one of DreamWorks' best. And I don't know why I was in the mood for it. It was either going to be, I don't know. I do like a lot of older stuff, But in terms of like more recent stuff, and I suppose I'm not as familiar with it, I figured that would be a good thing to watch. And people like Shrek, so you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
he barely features in it. He's like, he has a small cameo, but yeah, no, that was my decision. That was what I went for.
Oh,
Yeah,
fair enough.
yeah.
And it is always great to hear what people have picked. That's the whole reason I love doing this, because it's just great to get either ideas for films and food and things like that. So no, it's good choice. Well, thank you for going through all that with me.
No problem.
Before we go,
Mhm.
this is the time. If you've got the elevator pitch for your channel, or if there's anything you want to shout out about your channel, yeah, happy for you to go ahead. I'll stick all the links and everything in the show notes, but yeah, go for it.
I've actually been very pleased and very surprised actually by a lot of the recent support I've had, especially in terms of I've recently been doing shorts for the first time, and I got a very positive response. I did a poll on YouTube asking people if they enjoyed them, and it wasn't unanimous, but it was largely, you know, positive. I am currently working on, as I mentioned earlier, a collaboration video that I'm currently coming up to a bit of a milestone. Well, it's well, I'm not sure really, because it's gradually increasing, but over the last few days it's kind of shot up by another 20 subscribers. So I'm nearly at 4,000 subs right now, and I'm thinking it might wind up being I might make it like a special episode, because it is pretty special. It would be a bit weird to have the collaboration video followed by just a very normal video for the 4,000 sub
Yeah.
mark, you know. So I'm thinking of doing it for a either saving it for when I pass the 4,000 mark, or when it's done I'll upload it. In any case, I'm working on a collaboration video, so it won't be, well, hopefully it won't be too long before you hear from me again. So yeah, that's all I have to say for the time being.
Okay. No, look, if you aren't checking Michael's channel out, please do. Like I said, I've become a huge fan. So I've already subscribed. And congratulations on the nearing the 4K. That's brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been very gradual since the 3,000 mark, because obviously of other commitments and stuff. But yeah, it's gradually increasing. So, you know, massive thank you to everyone who
Good stuff
subscribed.
on that. And yeah, so check my show notes for all his social links. Okay, Michael, I think all that's left to say is thank you. I'll talk to you after we stop recording about getting you back on again. And for me, yeah, I will see you next time on Casting Views.
1, 2, 3, 4. If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, take what we've got, 'cause you